The air was thick with tension, the night alive with whispers of destiny. In the valley of Zorah, a child was about to be born, one who would shake the foundation of Israel and strike fear into the hearts of its enemies. They called him Samson, a man whose strength would surpass every warrior, a man set apart for God before he even drew his first breath. Yet even the strongest can stumble, and every mighty story carries shadows. From the moment of his birth, Samson was different. The angel's words lingered in the ears of his mother. She had been told that she would conceive and bear a son. No razor would touch his head, for the boy would be a Nazirite to God from the womb. He would begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. This was a prophecy that felt larger than life, impossible yet undeniable. She carried it like a flame in her heart, a mixture of awe and fear. How could a single child change the course of a nation? Even as a baby, Samson seemed marked. His cries were fierce, full of energy that hinted at the force within. His parents watched him closely, sometimes with pride, sometimes with a quiet and gnawing worry. For gifts so great are often a test, and the seeds of weakness can grow alongside strength. The story of Samson began not with a cry, but with silence. His mother had been barren, her womb closed for years, and the weight of disappointment pressed upon her spirit like a heavy stone. Yet one evening, in the stillness of her home, an angel appeared. The glow was gentle but unmistakable, and fear gripped her, for she had never seen such a vision. She was told that she would conceive and bear a son, and that his life would be dedicated to God from the beginning. He would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. The words were both a blessing and a burden. Samson was not just a child. He was Israel's weapon, God's instrument. In that blessing lay a warning. Power is responsibility, and a life set apart is never ordinary. His parents reflected deeply on the angel's instructions. They learned the Nazirite vows that would shape his life. They were to abstain from wine. They were to avoid defilement. No razor was ever to touch his head. Samson's life was consecrated holy, a constant offering to God. Even the Philistines sensed a shift in the winds. They did not know the boy, but they felt the tremors of a force beyond understanding. In villages and open fields, elders spoke in hushed tones of a child whose destiny could one day tip the scales of war. Samson was growing, and the world seemed to lean in, waiting to witness what the hand of God would accomplish through him. From his earliest years, Samson was remarkable. He moved with strength that belied his age, performing feats no ordinary child could. He could lift heavy objects that adults strained to budge, and his reflexes were unnaturally fast. The villagers whispered, some in awe, some in fear. Even as a boy, he carried himself differently, his gaze steady, his demeanor proud. Yet with pride often comes vulnerability. Samson was impulsive, quick to act without thought, and though he had strength beyond measure, wisdom had yet to temper his heart. He would wrestle with older boys, tear trees from the ground for sport, and leap into streams, laughing as if gravity and danger had no hold over him. His parents watched with both pride and anxiety. Strength so raw can be both shield and snare. How could they prepare him for the day the Philistines would rise against Israel? The angel's prophecy hummed in their minds, a reminder that their son's life was never just his own. Every victory, every act of courage carried the weight of destiny. Samson's first true test came not in battle, but in the wilderness. A lion appeared, fierce and threatening, blocking his path. Other men would have fled, yet Samson stood still, feeling the pulse of God within him. His hands gripped, his heart pounded, and with a roar that matched the lion's, he tore it apart. The village spoke of him in awe. The boy, they said, he is no ordinary man. God is with him. But the lion was only the beginning. Samson's feats grew bolder with each passing year. Fields burned, enemies scattered, and the Philistines began to whisper fearfully of the man whose strength was unmatched. Yet in every triumph there was a hint of the flaw that would one day lead him astray. Impulsiveness. Pride glimmered in his eyes, and he began to rely more on his own power than the hand of God that had guided him. Gifts are powerful, but unchecked pride and desire can blind even the strongest. God's hand is the true source of strength, and forgetting this is the first step toward downfall. Even the strongest walls have cracks. For Samson, it would be beauty, cunning, and deceit that would test him most. A woman named Delilah entered the story, not yet fully, but her shadow loomed over the future. Whispers of her name would later chill his bones. Yet at this moment, Samson walked unaware, focused on feats and youthful daring. The air of suspense thickened. The Philistines, sensing the coming storm, plotted quietly. Samson's strength was legendary, but so too would be the power of temptation, a reminder that no matter how mighty, the human heart can falter. As the scene keeps fading, the audience is left with a palpable tension. The boy who tore a lion apart now steps unknowingly toward the snares of love and betrayal, his destiny still unfolding. Even the strongest among us face trials that no one sees. What would you do if a temptation loomed larger than your strength? Samson, the man whose hands could crush a lion, walked among the people with confidence that was part courage, part pride. He had grown into a young man whose strength was unmatched, whose reputation spread like wildfire across the hills and valleys of Israel. But even as the Philistines whispered his name in fear, a shadow crept closer, not in armor or on horseback, but in beauty and cunning. Her name was Delilah. Among whispers in the towns, stories of her allure traveled faster than any of Samson's feats. She was more than just beautiful. She carried an intelligence and guile that could ensnare the mightiest of men. For Samson, it was a subtle pull at first, a curiosity he barely recognized, and yet the seeds of his greatest trial were already sown. The Philistines watched from the shadows, knowing that true victory over Samson would not come by swords or spears, but by cunning, patience, and betrayal. Their plan was simple in words, but complicated in execution. Use desire to weaken the strongest man in Israel. It began with whispers in the marketplace, casual glances, and chance encounters that seemed coincidental. Samson noticed her, though he told himself it was mere curiosity. Delilah's smile was soft, but it carried intent, a deliberate draw into her orbit. "Samson," she said one evening, her voice low, almost intimate, "why do the Philistines fear you so?" He laughed, brushing off her question, yet there was a tension in the air, a feeling of something unspoken. The Philistines' plan was working from the shadows. Delilah was the instrument. Samson, in his pride, thought himself immune to danger. After all, no man had ever bested him. But temptation is subtle, and even strength does not guard the heart against desire. Over weeks, Delilah wove herself into Samson's life. Her questions became persistent, her smiles more intentional. Each encounter pulled him further from caution, and the story began to turn from feats of strength to the vulnerability of the human heart. The Philistines, desperate to defeat him, pressed Delilah for answers. "Find the source of his strength," they whispered, "and the man who terrifies our armies will fall before you." Delilah approached Samson, her voice soft but insistent. "Tell me, Samson, what makes you so strong?" At first, he evaded her, offering riddles, deflections, and laughter, but the question haunted him. Pride and desire warred within his heart. The thought that no one could ever truly know his secret was intoxicating, but fear of vulnerability whispered alongside it. 3 times he misled her, giving false answers. "Tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have never been dried, then I shall become weak." The Philistines waited, but he snapped the ropes like threads of straw. "Bind me with new ropes never used, you will see me become weak." Again they tried, and again he broke free. "Weave the 7 braids of my hair into the loom and fasten it. I shall become weak." And once more he laughed in freedom. But each attempt brought Delilah closer to the truth, each failure sharpening her resolve. The tension built. Viewers feel the stakes rising, waiting for the inevitable collapse. Even as Samson resisted, doubt and desire gnawed at him. He had been strong all his life, undefeated, but he had never faced the cunning of the human heart. Delilah's allure was not just beauty, it was persistence, intelligence, and subtle manipulation. In the quiet moments, Samson reflected on his life. His feats had brought glory, but also pride. The angel's warning at his birth, that his life was set apart, echoed in his mind. He knew he was destined for greatness, but he was also aware that the Philistines' plots were closing in. His impulsive heart, once a source of adventure, now whispered caution too late. Life lesson woven. Strength alone does not guard against temptation. Wisdom and humility are shields the strongest cannot ignore. Finally, under constant pressure and emotional manipulation, Samson revealed the secret. His hair, never cut, the source of his Nazirite strength. Delilah smiled, and the moment of doom arrived. While he slept, she called the Philistines. Their hands were ready with scissors. Samson's hair fell strand by strand. With it, the strength that had terrified armies, torn lions, and felled enemies vanished. He awoke to ropes, chains, and eyes gouged in cruelty. His captors mocked him, dragging him into the Philistine stronghold. The once mighty Samson was now broken, humbled, and blind. The weight of his pride and desire had brought him to the floor. Visual tension tip. Describe the chains, the harsh Philistine laughter, the pain of blindness, and the psychological torment. Make viewers feel his helplessness. In the Philistine prison, Samson's despair grew. He was forced to grind grain, mocked daily, and paraded as a spectacle of humiliation. Men who had once feared him now jeered, called him fool, and treated him as nothing more than a display of their victory. Yet in the shadows of despair, a spark remained. Samson began to remember the God who had set him apart. The prayer, once casual and taken for granted, became urgent, deep, and desperate. Strength had failed him, but faith remained. Life lesson. The lowest point is often the place God uses to shape your final triumph. Even the strongest must bow to divine timing and power. The story is quietly fading, blind, and at rock bottom yet alive. The Philistines, unaware of the lingering spark of divine power within him, prepared to celebrate their victory in a temple filled with thousands of revelers. For the audience, suspense peaks. How can the man who tore a lion apart, who felled armies with a jawbone, rise from such depths? Reflective this. Sometimes our greatest falls come not from enemies, but from choices we make. What would you do if you were in Samson's place? The temple of Dagon roared with the cries of thousands. The Philistines, drunk with victory and arrogance, had brought Samson to the central hall, thinking the man who had once torn lions and armies apart was finally broken. Blind, chained, humiliated, he stood as the centerpiece of their triumph. Yet in the stillness of his heart, Samson felt a stirring, a quiet but undeniable presence. His eyes, though physically blind, began to perceive truth. He remembered the angel's words at his birth, the Nazirite vow, the strength that had come from God alone. His past triumphs, his pride, his impulsiveness, all of it faded into clarity. For the first time in months, Samson prayed, not for vengeance, not for freedom, but for one last act of obedience, one final alignment with God's purpose. He whispered, "O Lord God, remember me, strengthen me just once more, that I may pay back the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Judges chapter 16-28. The spark of hope ignited, faint at first, but growing with each heartbeat. The audience can feel it too. Tension, anticipation, and awe converge. Samson's prayer was raw and desperate. Not a boast, not a plea for personal glory, but a surrender to God's will. His chains rattled as he knelt, his head bowed, yet his spirit lifted. He reflected on his life, the feats of strength that had made him proud, the impulsive decisions that had led him to this pit of despair, and the subtle whispers of temptation that had betrayed him. Every memory, every regret, and every lesson swirled together in his mind. Strength without God is nothing, he thought. It is only in surrender that true power is restored. Life lesson woven naturally. Even the mightiest can fall, but humility and faith can restore what pride and impulse destroy. Samson's hands, though bound, began to tremble, not with weakness but with anticipation. He touched the temple pillars, feeling the structure, sensing the weight of thousands above him. The chains that had once symbolized his defeat now became the instruments of his final obedience. The Philistines, unaware, jeered and mocked. They had celebrated his downfall, confident that the man who had once terrified them was reduced to nothing. Their laughter echoed through the halls, oblivious to the divine power that still flowed within Samson. With each breath, Samson steadied himself. His faith became a shield, his mind a weapon. He whispered silently, "Let this final act glorify God, not me. Let the enemy fall by his hand, through me." Suspense tip, slow-motion description of every detail, the pillars, the crowd, the chains, his posture. Let viewers feel the weight and stakes of the moment. Samson pushed. Pillar after pillar trembled under his hands. The chains strained, groaned, and snapped. The hall shook as if the earth itself obeyed him. Thousands of Philistines screamed in panic and disbelief as the temple began to collapse. Stone, timber, and dust rained down. Samson, grounded in faith, felt strength surge through his body, not from himself but from God. Every pillar that fell, every beam that cracked, was a testament to divine power. He fell upon the final pillar with a roar that merged with the crumbling temple, toppling the structure completely. Thousands of enemies were struck down. The celebration turned to chaos, and Israel's oppressors lay defeated. These are lessons you should know of. True power is aligned with purpose. Strength without God is fleeting, but obedience can move mountains, literally. The dust settled. Samson lay among the ruins, alive though wounded. The Philistines were defeated, and Israel was free from oppression for a time. His victory was not just physical, it was spiritual, a culmination of trials, falls, and redemption. He had learned the hardest lessons, that temptation can blind even the strongest, that pride can lead to downfall, and that God's strength surpasses human might. His final act was a legacy, a story whispered through generations, not just of raw power, but of faith, surrender, and divine purpose. Samson's story is more than a tale of strength and battle. It is a reflection of every human life. Gifts must be tempered with wisdom. Temptation can destroy even the mightiest if unchecked. Humility and surrender to God restore what pride and impulsiveness can ruin. For the viewer, a subtle reflection question. If you were at your lowest, would you surrender to God and let Him work through you or rely on your own strength? Share this story with someone who needs hope that no fall is final when God is with you. Imagine the scene. The temple in ruins, dust rising like smoke in the golden light of the sun, Samson kneeling in prayer, chains broken, eyes lifted in gratitude. Israel is free, yet the story carries weight, a warning, a lesson, a legacy. Samson, heroic and tragic, a man flawed yet redeemed, a man chosen by God, a man who learned that true strength is measured not by feats, but by faith and obedience. Samson's story is a powerful reminder. Strength alone cannot save us, but surrender to God can turn even the deepest failures into triumph. Every fall, every mistake, every moment of weakness carries the seed of redemption if we remain faithful. If this story inspired you, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Your support helps these timeless lessons reach more hearts. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that will challenge and inspire your faith. And remember, every trial has a purpose, every weakness can become a victory, and every story has more to teach. I'll see you in the next video, where another tale of courage, faith, and destiny awaits.